Good afternoon, everybody. Today, we are going to be continuing our talk on ecology, continuing our talk on biodiversity, resources, materials, relationships, and we are going to start that entire we're going to continue this entire conversation by talking about the different material cycles that exist in balanced, stable ecosystems. We've talked already a little bit about how animals and plants interact with each other, one producing oxygen, the other taking oxygen, producing carbon dioxide, and how plants and animals get to work together in order to survive. Right, we saw that in our aquarium example. We've seen that when we talked about respiration, when we talked about cellular respiration and photosynthesis. We're going to build off of that. We're going to talk about the material cycles, and we're going to talk about the water cycle, the nitrogen cycle, and then a little tidbit on different relationships that animals have with each other, and some classification of those relationships. The idea of recycling materials is something that we need for a ecosystem to be stable, just like we need a healthy amount of competition between organisms. We don't want things occupying the same niche. We need organisms in an ecosystem that can exchange CO2 and oxygen, that can handle the water cycle, and that can contribute to the nitrogen cycle. Right? These are the three big ones that we need constantly recycled through an ecosystem. Right, we're going to start with the one that we know the best. We're going to start with the idea of a gas cycle, right? The CO2 and oxygen cycle, which is something we have seen before, right? We've seen the gas cycle before. We know that plants undergo photosynthesis. They take in CO2 and they give off O2. We know that animals then undergo cellular respiration, taking in the oxygen and breathing out the CO2. So we have a nice cycle of CO2 and O2 that goes forever. When we talk about polluting with carbon dioxide, we're really talking about the fact that there's much more carbon dioxide produced than there are plants to take it in. So when we talk about like high carbon dioxide levels, when we talk about a carbon footprint, and we're mentioning these factors, we're looking at the fact that there's more CO2 being made than plants can take in. And so that leads to a buildup of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which leads to a whole slew of problems on its own. In a balanced ecosystem, we have enough carbon dioxide being made and enough oxygen being made to satisfy all the animals and enough CO2 to satisfy all the plants. We have a good balance of the rate of production, the rate of consumption of both of these things. In addition to our gas cycle, right, our oxygen and CO2 being, recycled around, we have the water cycle. The water cycle is interesting because there's a limited amount of water in the world. There is all the water that exists is all we've got. We can't really make any more, and we don't really destroy any water. It really cycles around the environment. Right, we have water in liquid form. Right, we have liquid water. So that's our ponds, our oceans, our lakes, our puddles. They evaporate to form clouds. Eventually, the clouds produce rain, which then gets absorbed by animals, right? Not absorbed, but animals drink in from the rain, our clean rainwater, and then the animals are going to release some liquid back into the environment. And this cycle sometimes skips animals, right? Sometimes the animals don't interact with the rain. We have puddles that nobody touches. But this is the idea of the cycle, the idea that the rain is going to fuel the things that the animals are going to take from. Right? So the rain is going to refill the pond, it's going to refill the stream, it's going to refill, all of the clean water sources when animals drink that. And then when they sweat or when they pee, that urine, that sweat, is the liquid that then evaporates to become the clouds, cleaning itself along the way. As the urine or sweat evaporates, the things in there that aren't water get left behind, which then in turn are nutrients for the soil, or they are directly taken in by plants. Right? And this cycle continues on to eternity, right, with all of the liquid water that exists on the planet. Right, so cleaning of urine and cleaning of waste, that is a big part of this cycle, right, because that's this entire part, right? This is filtering / cleaning of urine, sweat, etc. Right. So, a couple of questions from the chat. Possible to create more water? It is possible to create more water, but that would then eat up some of the oxygen and hydrogen that we have. Whatever water we have right now is what gets constantly cycled throughout. It's not that we can't make more water, it's that it's not practical to really make more water. And so when it rains, that rain is the same water that we had on the planet X years ago, right? There's no secret underground water factory that's making more water. Jack, we do have a limited amount of water, right? If we started, let's say we took the ocean and we stuck it in barrels and we sent it into space, we would then have less water on the planet. So it's not that we have a limited amount in that there is a little bit of it, it's that we have a limited amount in that there is no more being made. So limited doesn't mean, right? Doesn't mean a small amount. Right? Limited doesn't mean small. Limited just means that there is a limit to it. Right? There's a lot of water on the planet. Right? The planet's 75-80% water. So it's not that there's a small amount of water, it's just that there's nothing making more water. But again, we have this cycle, right? If anytime that this cycle is interrupted, we lose water from that ecosystem. Yes, Jack. Right, so animals being born, animals then peeing, right? Those animals got water from somewhere and they're releasing that water back to then evaporate later, or to be taken in by plants to be evaporated later, right? To be put back into this cycle. right? The odds are that you have at one point drank the same water that a dinosaur drank at some point. Right? There's no. It's the same water recycled, 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 over and over and over and over again. Right. The third cycle in our last nutrient cycle that we have is actually the nitrogen cycle. Filtering water isn't a lie. Filtering water is. Let's pause here. Filtering water is definitely not a lie. Filtering water takes out anything extra that was in it. Right. If you have a Brita filter at home, that's not a lie, and that's not doing nothing. You're still cleaning the water of anything else that might be in it. Right, but that being said, right, water is water. If you're taking water and stuff, right, the extra stuff is what you're filtering out of water. Our third cycle, our nitrogen cycle, is probably our most complicated of the three cycles. More just because there's a lot of things we haven't really talked about in it. When we talk about a decomposer, right, when we're looking at the fungi in a ecosystem, this is really the main job of a decomposer. They're going to take the remains of animals and break them down to put ammonia and nitrates and nitrogen into the environment for plants to take in. So we go from this cycle of the soil and the air. It gets taken in by the plants. Some animals eat the plants, and then animals eat other animals to pass it along. And then when animals and plants die, the decomposers are going to take that and put the decomposers are going to take the dead organisms, break them down, and release the nitrogen back into the soil and the air for the plants to take in, for the animals to eat, and then they're going to die. The decomposers release it. Plants take it, animals die. Right? Over and over and over again, this cycle is going to happen. Right, so when you plant a garden or something and you have fertilizer to put on that garden, the whole point of fertilizer is to give nutrients like ammonia, nitrate into the soil to allow for the plants to take in those nutrients and then grow. Right? Because when you start by putting a plant in a pot to try to grow it, you're not taking it from an ecosystem every time, right? You're making a new sort of ecosystem for this plant. And there's no decomposers, there's nothing in the soil that you bought from the store, right? You have to get the fertilizer to add those nutrients in. By complex molecules, we're talking about proteins, amino acids, some DNA. Right, nitrogen is a pretty key building block in a lot of things that we then use to build upon. What would happen if a carnivore ate only plants? It would not get the nutrients that it needs necessarily. It's possible for a carnivore to become an herbivore, but mostly carnivores are carnivores because that's how they have evolved. Um, it's about, the type of teeth that they have, right? If this is the jaw of a carnivore, they have more pointed teeth for ripping into and tearing meat. Whereas herbivores, if you look at the mouth of an herbivore and the type of teeth they have, there's a lot of flat teeth, which are there for crushing and grinding of plants and nuts and other like harder plant fibers. So a carnivore that started to eat plants isn't really adapted to eat plants, right? It has grown over the course of thousands of years to eat meat and to hunt meat, right? Whereas an herbivore has these types of teeth, right? Like these flat teeth for the idea to grind plants up and to crush nuts between their teeth to break berries and things like that. Whereas like a sharp tooth isn't really going to do anything. You ever tried to get a grape onto your fork? Right, it's not the right tool for the job. So carnivores just don't have the right tools for the job to become herbivores. Whereas while we're on the topic, if we think of a human mouth, right, humans have both sharp teeth, not quite as pointed as the ones I'm drawing here, but we have sharper teeth in the front, and then in the back we have our more flat, grindy teeth, because we are omnivores, and we are made to eat both meats and plants, right? We have the tools, and by tools I mean teeth. All right, we've got the correct kind of teeth for eating meat. We've got the correct kind of teeth for eating plants, right? We have evolved this specific set of teeth over time to suit our diets. Actually, I don't need to do that. I can just do this. So, the last thing I wanted to talk about today, before we call it, I wanted to talk about relationships among species. A couple of words that we probably know already. The idea of a parasite. Sorry, Filippo, I just saw that question. Let me take a second here. Would it be reasonable to say that a person who eats a vegan or vegetarian diet is more likely to develop offspring who don't have as sharp teeth? The answer to that question is no. They wouldn't develop offspring with a less sharp set of teeth. It in the same way that if you have a broken arm, like you're not more likely to have a kid who will then break their arm, right? Things that happen to you aren't going to affect your DNA in a way that will affect your offspring. Right? If over time, let's say, more and more and more, if at some point in the future we stop eating meat as a species entirely, over the course of years and years and years, we might lose our front sharp canines. Right? That might evolve out of us over time if that is a thing that is beneficial for us as a species. And when we talk about evolution a little later, we'll see that it's a really slow process and that humans are realistically not going to evolve anymore because we have so many protections in place in terms of our lifestyle and our health. Right, we're not really competing for a lot of stuff anymore physically, so we don't really do survival of the fittest a whole lot. Um, so here, when we're looking at these three different types of relationships, really it's vocab words that we want to recognize. If there is a parasitic relationship, one organism benefits and the other is harmed. Right? So we're talking a lot about viruses right now, right? Viruses in humans, the virus benefits, the human does not. Not even that the human does not benefit, the human is actively harmed. Right? A mosquito or a leech, those are going to feed off of us while we are harmed from them. A little bit on the lighter side of this, right? A little bit less severe is one organism benefits but the other is unaffected. That's commensalism, right? If you have barnacles on a whale, the barnacles benefit from being moved around. The barnacles are going to benefit from being moved place to place, getting all of the leftover food that whales are not eating. But they don't hurt the whale, right? They're just there. The third type of relationship is the best one because both organisms are going to benefit. Right, so that's the bacteria in our gut. They help break down things that we can't break down. Right, so it helps us, and they get to eat and survive inside of our digestive tract, so it's good for them. A mutualistic or relationship of mutualism is going to be helpful for both things, right? Mutual meaning both. Parasitic is just a vocab word that we should know, where one is harmed and the other is not. Commensalism, kind of like actually it's not kind of like communism. It's not at all kind of like communism. But the idea that one benefits, the other is unaffected, right? A little bit less severe than a parasitic relationship. In tomorrow's lesson, we're going to wrap up this unit by talking about the impact that humans have on ecosystems and how ecosystems can transition from one type of environment to another type of environment. And that'll wrap up our ecology unit. I'm going to transition this stream into office hours and tutoring, just like usual. So if you have any questions or comments or concerns, just stick around, look at the new stream that pops up in a couple minutes, and we will talk a little bit more then. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a fantastic day.